Introduction: The Journey from Otherness to Awesomeness. When I was 16 years old, I lived on a roller coaster. You know those tracks. You sit in a little car and it takes you up, down, and around. You have no real say in where it goes, how fast it moves, or anything else about it. I don't mean a physical roller coaster. I'm talking about the ups and downs of worthiness and shame. Back then, I didn't know how worthy I was. Subconsciously, I was constantly evaluating myself, judging. I'm good, I'm bad, I'm a winner, I'm a loser, I'm successful, I'm a failure, I'm a nice person, I'm the meanest person on earth, I'm socially smart, I'm complete awkwardness, I'm a fountain, I'm a drain, I'm a good girl, I'm a bad girl, I'm a very bad girl. I measured my worthiness by the things that happened to me or by the opinions of other people in my life. If I failed, if I was successful in what I was doing, I decided that I was respectable. If I failed, I was in a muddy puddle of shame. If I respected a person, his or her opinion about me mattered. If I pleased them, I could do anything. If they were upset with me, I could do nothing. Up and down, back again, and around. That was the engine of my roller coaster. Maybe it's the engine of yours. Or maybe the engine of your roller coaster looks more like stress, anxiety, jealousy, or resentment. When you're on a roller coaster, who's in charge of where you go? Who's in charge of how good or how bad the ride is, how good or bad the quality of your life is? Not you, right? You're just the rider. And when the ride isn't that great, there's not much you can do to make it better. The switches get pulled by someone else. The most you could do is hold on tight and scream. I'm sure you know what the roller coaster ride looks like, and if you're anything like me, you might have never even realized there was a different way to live. As I grew into my role as a wife and mother, I was proud of my ability to ride the roller coaster gracefully. I could tolerate stress and push aside or ignore feelings of resentment. I could smile and speak kindly even when my heart was bursting with misery. I thought that was a pretty noble way of living. At the time, it never occurred to me that there was an entirely different way to live, a wonderful way where life couldn't be compared to being on a ride, a way of being that's like a journey on a road, where we could walk or crawl or dance through life with genuine dignity and inner peace, no matter what else is going on around us. Here's how I got off my roller coaster. One day, years ago, my friend Aviva called me. She said, "Would you be willing to learn together on Shabbos morning?" She knew that I was home with my kids at that hour and not going anywhere. I was happy to agree. My favorite kind of learning at the time was juicy insight that had immediate, practical applications to my life. When Aviva came to my house that Shabbos morning, I pulled out that kind of sefer, that kind of book. "That's not what I have in mind," Aviva said. She picked up the Baal HaTanya's deep philosophical writings compiled in a sefer called Likutei Torah. I was taken aback. I said, "That's intense stuff. I never learned anything like it before. And anyway, we'll never finish an entire mimer, an entire lesson in just 1 hour." Aviva held on to her choice of learning. It doesn't matter how much we get done. It's not about knowing the pages. It's about studying the ideas, being with them, just connecting with even a few lines, that's all. It was completely different from what I expected or from what I wanted. But I was in. We started learning every Shabbos morning. The Baal HaTanya's words were not a quick guide to acquiring happiness. They were not about the top 10 parenting strategies. There was no short list of ways to enrich my marriage or my relationships. Instead, there were lengthy, detailed descriptions about how awesome Hashem is. There was a portrayal of the gazillion angels singing praises to Hashem, an explanation of the different forms of Hashem's light that are manifest in the world, a vivid description of a neshama's intense holiness and the process of its descent into the world. At first, the information didn't seem useful to me. I wanted and thought I needed the sharp, clear catalog of what to do and what not to do. Compared to what I wanted, my new kind of learning seemed irrelevant to my personal life. If not for my commitment to learn it, I might have walked away. But we kept it up every Shabbos morning for months and then years. After the first year of learning, I started to become aware that something had shifted inside of me. When I looked into the mirror, when I stopped to think, I realized that I no longer saw myself as a rider on a roller coaster. Instead, I saw myself as a carrier of Hashem's light. A carrier of Hashem's light. A person with an unstoppable force of worthiness, dignity, and respectability. I'd stopped the constant self-assessment and judgment and instead started living with greater energy. I saw myself as a person whose inner light generates the courage to show up and give each moment my very best shot. And I could feel deeply satisfied in that best shot without comparing myself to anyone else's best. In retrospect, I can see that the learning was my weekly trip into a different dimension of reality. It was a weekly immersion into a whole different way of seeing the world. A way of seeing the world, a lens of clarity where Hashem's reality is the only operative truth. Every week, my connection with Hashem's reality became stronger. As He became more real to me, my own neshama, the part of Hashem within me, became more real to me. With time, I started to see myself and the world through the lens of Hashem's presence. In that space, I couldn't be a backseat rider in my life. I was a carrier of Hashem's light. It was no longer the other people or situations pulling all the switches in my life. I was the one pulling the switches in my life. And the feelings about myself that I had inside my heart, the labels I wore, the words I used to define myself, no longer seemed like random landings. Having learned about the Yetzer Hara, I could recognize these beliefs and ideas as the work of my Yetzer Hara, whose job is to distract me from Hashem's reality. I started noticing when those self-definitions popped into my head, and I would say, hey, I'm actually not worthless or shameful. I'm carrying a part of Hashem in me. How dare I speak to myself with such disrespect? No way. I'm not doing that anymore. That doesn't reflect my true dignity. I'm not buying into that idea, not even for a second, and not even for a joke. I grew up knowing about Hashem and believing in His reality. I always knew that I have a neshama. I did mitzvahs to the best of my ability. I learned daven, said tehillim. I was always deeply committed to Torah observance. The problem was, in addition to believing in Hashem, I also believed a whole bunch of lies. Today I'm calling those beliefs lies. Back then, I saw them as the simple rules of the world. They were the ideas that many people believe about who we are and how the world works. I didn't think about them. I didn't question their validity in the face of Hashem's reality. Looking back, I now know that it's natural to absorb the ideas that are commonly accepted by the people around us. We live by whatever values our experience and our culture dictates until we consciously change our minds. In our never-ending quest for inner peace and satisfying relationships, many of us tend to search for new understandings, but I found that what gets in the way of the goodness that we want is not so much a lack of information, it's our lack of connecting with and living by the information that we already know is true. In our Frum communities, our lives revolve around Torah observance. We identify ourselves as firm believers in Hashem. We do everything around that belief. Yet, we also believe ideas that contradict Hashem's truth. We are well informed of our neshama, yet we don't reference that information when we're navigating our relationships, our challenges, or our struggles. There's a huge gap between our inherent faith in Hashem and the way we engage in our lives. How is this possible? It's because of two reasons. Number one, external distraction. Hashem is hidden. We're physical people. We tend to believe what we see, and we don't see Hashem. We see politics and money controlling the world, not Hashem. We see people, including our own selves, giving us what we need, not Hashem. We see our accomplishments and external qualities defining us, not our neshama. Number two, internal distraction. We have a Yetzer Hara. Each of us has an internal force of distraction and delusion known as our Yetzer Hara. Our Yetzer Hara is a force within us that actively distracts us from the values and beliefs of our deeper selves. These two reasons, the external distraction of Hashem's hiddenness and the internal distraction of our Yetzer Hara, these two reasons are intertwined. Our Yetzer Hara rides on Hashem's hiddenness and pushes us to forget Hashem's reality. Our Yetzer Hara is not just an internal force that gets us to do things that are wrong. Our Yetzer Hara gets us to think in a way that's wrong. And when I say the word wrong, I mean messed up, confused, distorted, disconnected. Because if an idea is not true, we can call it a lie and walk away. But when a lie seems to be true, we embrace it, we act on it, and that's what I call a mess. Our Yetzer Hara hijacks our minds. It gets us to see the world in a way that denies Hashem's reality and contradicts the reality of our worthiness. It makes that view seem so utterly compelling. We think and act as if we are in the flow of real truth, when it's really just lies. Is your Yetzer Hara anything like the one I'm describing? Here's a test that will give you instant clarity about that. When you say the word real world, what are you referring to? What's your real world? Is it the reality of Hashem? Or is it the reality of politics and money? Is the real world your local shul and your weekly Torah class? Or is the real world the businesses in Manhattan and the classes at Harvard? Without knowing you, I know what your answer is. Sorry. We're on the same page. We believe in Hashem's reality, but we live in a world where practically Hashem's hiddenness is our reality. We naturally absorb the values and beliefs of our physical reality. And where those values and beliefs contradict Hashem's emes, our Yetzer Hara gets us to point to those contradictions and say, let's be real. This is simply how it is. Let's talk about Beryl. Beryl is a poor person who travels to a distant land to earn money. Arriving in the distant land, Beryl immediately notices diamonds all over the ground. Delighted with the ease of the wealth, he scoops up some of the diamonds into his pocket and saunters into the nearest restaurant where he orders a lavish meal. When he's finished eating, Beryl casually places a small diamond on the cashier's counter and with the ear of the wealthiest of men, he says, "You could keep the change." The cashier looks at Beryl through crooked eyes and says, "What's this about? Please give me real money." A short conversation later, Beryl realizes that in this distant land, people use chicken fat to buy food and clothing, while diamonds are not considered useful at all. To pay his bill at the restaurant, Beryl needs to work there. He turns out to be a capable employee, and the restaurant's management offers him a permanent job. Beryl accepts the job, working long hours in an exhausting effort to earn as much money as he could. His goal is that when he returns home in a few short months, he'll be carrying a pretty bundle of money with which he can support his family. The months pass quickly, and finally, Beryl is on his way home. He sends word to his family notifying them that his trip was successful and that he's on his way home with a small fortune. Beryl's wife and children are ecstatic. They start preparing for a grand homecoming celebration. The entire town is buzzing with the story of Beryl, the poor man who finally achieved financial success. When Beryl's ship is due to arrive at the port, his wife and children gather at the seashore wearing their finest clothing. As the great ship comes closer to the shore, everyone could make out the figure of a man, it is certainly Beryl, waving a red kerchief from the deck of the ship. The children start jumping up and down. The adults wipe away tears of joy. But then something strange happens. A terrible smell fills the air. The stench is unbearable. Everyone runs away except for Beryl's wife. She's the only one who greets him as he steps off the ship, proudly dragging his first and largest box of, you guessed it, chicken fat. Facing his wife's utter confusion, Beryl suddenly remembers the crooked eyes of the restaurant cashier back in the distant land. In a flash, he realizes his grand mistake. In this place of his hometown, diamonds are the things that have value, while chicken fat is used for nothing. As the story goes, Beryl reaches into his pocket and is grateful to discover a handful of diamonds. Of course, this story never happened. It's a mashal, a way of portraying the story of our lives. Our neshama, like Beryl, comes into this world in order to acquire a wealth of Torah and mitzvahs. Our neshama depends on our conscious self to gather the wealth, yet we are often as confused as poor Beryl was. Torah and mitzvahs have eternal absolute value, but in our world, Torah and mitzvahs are not seen as the supreme most important value. Instead, money is valued, external success is valued, fame, fortune, social status, good looks, public opinion. These are the things that have supreme value. Chicken fat, all of them. But since this is the way our world actually works, we naturally start pursuing these things as if their value, not the value of Torah and mitzvahs, is what matters more than anything else in our lives. Unlike Beryl, who came to the distant land as an adult, we are born into the confusion. From the earliest moments of our infancy, we're completely submerged in a culture that attributes value and power to things other than Hashem. As such, we too attribute supreme value to physical things, and we attribute power to people. At the same time, we verbally affirm our belief in Hashem. We say that He is the one and only power of the world and all that's in it. There's an inherent disconnection between our innermost beliefs and the beliefs we embrace in our day-to-day living. Deep inside our hearts, we believe in Hashem's power. In our day-to-day living, we unintentionally negate and deny that belief. Until we are aware of this disconnection, we're controlled by it. Every day, we express our belief that Hashem is the exclusive, the one and only power in the world, and yet every day we act as if money and other people's behaviors are the powers that control our lives. I call this way of living otherness because it's other to what we really believe and other to the goodness that we want, the goodness that is our birthright. Otherness is where we ride on beliefs that contradict Hashem's reality. Otherness is where we actively depend on people and all kinds of things. It's where stress, misery, anxiety, helplessness, and self-pity are unavoidable facts of life. In otherness, we look at our disempowerment, our despair, our resentment, and we say, let's be real. This is just how life goes. This is just how it is. It's part of life. Do you know otherness? Of course you do. We are born into otherness. We're born on a roller coaster, a reality that hides Hashem's presence. We grow up and we operate within a world of contradictions. We're surrounded by distractions and delusions. And we get pulled further into the mess unless we're consciously choosing a different way. Here's how I got of otherness and how you can too. You see, when I lived in otherness, I engaged in my life like Beryl in the distant land. I attributed supreme value to things and power to people. And I suffered on my roller coaster. I know the profoundly bitter tastes of worthlessness, fear, anxiety, and just brokenness. How did I discover my lies? How did I hit the brakes on that ride? It happened during my weekly study sessions. For the first time in my life, I wasn't learning for the purpose of gaining information. I was learning for the purpose of connecting with the ideas. Sometimes the ideas seemed repetitive. Hashem is awesome beyond description. Hashem is infinite. Hashem is the absolute truth. Again and again and again. Sometimes the idea seemed abstract. The light of Hashem that fills the world, the light of Hashem that surrounds the world, the light of Hashem that's completely above the world. It seemed abstract. Sometimes I barely understood what the Baal HaTanya was teaching. You know what? It never mattered. We would sit there for an hour, contemplating, trying to absorb just one idea at a time. It was like trying on a pair of glasses that belonged to the Baal HaTanya. The lenses were colored with Hashem's reality. We would try to wear those glasses, though they were so much bigger than us. Week after week, the view through those lenses started coming into focus. The reality of Hashem's presence slowly penetrated the layers of my mind. I started to feel a connection with those glasses. I could see how they really belonged to me. I started seeing myself through the lens of Hashem's reality, seeing other people from that perspective, engaging in my life from that place. Getting off my roller coaster had not been my goal or even my desire, because I didn't even know there was a different way to live. Still, immersing my mind in Hashem's reality slowly rewired my brain. Hashem's reality became my personal reality. And then something interesting happened. I started noticing when my old perspectives clashed with my new pairs of glasses. I started becoming aware of the gap between the perspective of Hashem's reality and the contradicting ideas that I had always believed. For example, when I learned about the awesome value of my neshama, I wanted to feel the value I was learning about. And when I didn't feel the value, I listened to what was going on inside my mind. And I noticed a little voice in my head saying, "But you know the real truth about who you are, and it's got nothing to do with Hashem, so who are you fooling?" Once I noticed that thought, I could identify it as the voice of my Yetzer Hara. It was clearly contradicting the reality of Hashem. I could consciously reject it and embrace the value of my neshama as my truth. But until I identified that thought as one that's generated by my Yetzer Hara, it felt like it was generated by my own more rational, more experienced self. And of course, as in any other conflict, my more rational, experienced self would win the trophy, while my desire to feel valued because of my neshama was just a weak, abstract loser. The more I thought about Hashem, the more I noticed when my thoughts and habits were contradicting His reality. Little by little, I started peeling away those layers of beliefs I'd always lived with, to take on beliefs that were aligned with Hashem's reality. But until I noticed that those beliefs were contradicting my desired reality, they were my non-negotiable rules that I mindlessly obeyed. In the past, the thought of having an actual part of Hashem within me, my neshama, didn't make me feel special or excited. It didn't make me feel anything, really. It was just something I knew. But I didn't expect it to make me feel anything. I thought that our positive feelings about ourselves must come from concrete evidence, other people's approval, or factual success. That's like saying only chicken fat can make us rich. As the impact and value of Hashem's reality became more meaningful to me, the value of His light within me, my neshama, became more meaningful to me. And when that happened, I found myself far away from the roller coaster. I was far away from my otherness, that place of insecurity, shame, anxiety, disempowerment, and inner chaos. Somewhere along the way, my stifling, limiting, and self-destructive perceptions of myself got lost. That entire part of my collection went out the window. They simply flew away in the breeze. I got a new self-definition that sticks with permanent glue and takes up all the space that those old, smelly ideas used to occupy, plus a whole lot more. My new self-definition sparkles and glows even on the darkest of nights. It gives me energy, strength, and dignity that carries me as I carry it wherever I go. If my new self-definition were a physical label, it would say designed, defined, and powered by Hashem. Designed, defined, and powered by Melech Malchei Hamalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the King of all kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. That's the truth of who I am. and it's the truth of who you are. Now, while I was experiencing the changes described above, some friends started asking me about what was going on. My spiritual and emotional work became a topic of conversation. How does a person change? How does a person stop being engulfed by surrounding chaos? How can a person feel empowered despite disempowering circumstances? I was very blessed to have a few friends who were involved in 12-step recovery work. There was nothing casual about their interest. They insisted on clear, honest answers to their questions. They wanted to know the exact process of getting off the roller coaster and walking onto a real road. They wanted the complete, entire recipe. At the time, I didn't know the detailed recipe. I was just about tasting it myself for the first time. Their questions pushed me to start noticing the key ingredients and the process of the ongoing transformation. And one day, it hit me. The recipe was printed, and it wasn't anything new. In 1976, the Lubavitcher Rebbe introduced 12 Pesukim and Maimorei Chazal as principles for wholesome Jewish living and as practical tools for overcoming the Yetzer Hara. The Rebbe encouraged the translation of these principles in a language that would be meaningful and relevant for children and children at heart. That day, it hit me that all the key ingredients of transformation were in those 12 principles. I was astonished, enthralled, and delighted. I started thinking about the idea of establishing a program for emotional wellness based on these 12 principles. There were many reasons to think it would be successful, but I had my doubts too. In 2012, my husband, Rabbi Shterna Ginsberg, arranged for a meeting with Rabbi Dr. Abraham J. Twersky. We thought that a conversation with the venerated scholar would clarify the direction of my idea. In preparation for the meeting, my husband and I sat for many, many hours studying the 12 principles, researching their meaning, and thinking about what they looked like in action. We formulated a short text of a few lines for each of the principles and brought these pages with us to the meeting. Rabbi Twersky read through them and then leaned back in his chair and said, "Yes, this is a program." He shared that he'd been thinking about this idea on his own, that he had wanted this program to be developed, and he was so happy we were going to do it. He told us that our greatest obstacle would be people's unwillingness to be honest about our fierce struggles with disempowering emotions. He was absolutely right. When we were ready to leave, Rabbi Twersky asked, "Where do we go from here? What can I do to help?" His advice was meaningful, but his eagerness to get involved is what gave me the courage to start doing the work of making it happen. I used to wonder, was my ability to get off the roller coaster unique? Was it random? Or was it part of a universal truth that every person could access? Was it limited to my individual experience? Or was it a greater wealth that could enrich anyone's life? I was blessed with the opportunity to find out the answer to this question when, together with a group of women, I started a learning group called Connections. Structured around the 12 principles, the learning was about how believing in Hashem can make a difference to our practical lives. We'd meet every week with the shared goal of strengthening our connection with Hashem in a way that stretches to reach every corner of our lives, even our hidden beliefs, even our doubts and fears. The Connections Learning Group proved that the 12 principles were not only a springboard for fantastic, dynamic discussion, they were a framework around which we could invite beautiful joy into our lives. Over the years, our initial group became many different groups, including hundreds of participants. After every learning and discussion group, I'd reflect about what people shared. I'd think about the struggles and how their personal stories were unfolding. I wrote notes about what I was learning from experience. I studied them. With time, I was able to identify stumbling blocks that were getting in our way. I kept incorporating my own growing awareness and observations into the material we were learning in our groups. In 2014, Mrs. Hindi Moses, a talented life coach, teamed up with me and contributed greatly to the program's development. As a practicing professional who trained with leading mental health practitioners, Hindi saw this work not just as insightful or even helpful, but as a therapeutic model. Hindi uses the ideas and skills of this book in coaching individuals and couples towards energized living. The book that you're holding in your hands, the recording that you're listening to now, this introduction, and the chapters that will follow, is the step-by-step guide I was looking for all those years ago. It is a recipe for energized living, a formula that has been tried and tested by hundreds of wonderful women who have shared the journey with me. It's a clearly defined roadmap that takes us out of our personal otherness and into the glorious sunshine of Hashem's awesomeness. Each person who shared this journey has had different experiences, but one thing is the same for everyone who has done this work, no matter their age or their background, no matter their personal challenges. And here's the thing that everyone has in common. Forming a personal connection with Hashem's reality is how we discover our infinite respectability and our limitless possibilities. As you read this book, and as you listen through the chapters that will follow on these recordings, you'll discover with Hashem's help your own awesome self. You'll form your own personal connection with Hashem and with your identity as His one and only dear beloved child. Your custom-designed godly empowerment is waiting to be held. Today, that wondrous infinite force of light, is already yours. With it, you can get off the roller coaster. You can let go of self-destructive beliefs. You can walk away from the darkness of shame, blame, guilt, resentments, and misery. You can live and love with a peaceful heart and a dignified spirit. Because when you start to see yourself for the truth of who you are, you're not just getting off your own internal roller coaster. You stop taking all the people in your life along with you for your ride. When you start wearing God-colored lenses, you won't just see yourself differently. You'll see your husband differently, your children, your friends, the people around you, your work, your habits, your comings and goings. The world will look different. You won't do things only because you feel like you have no choice. Instead, you'll be empowered to choose. You'll see that you're capable of both giving and holding back. You'll choose Hashem. And with His help, you could do your life with more strength and dignity than you even knew you had. More authentic joy and clarity than you knew was possible. Uvacharta b'chaim. We can choose life. Today's world is a curtain that hides Hashem's presence. It's dark. There is so much pain in our lives. There's chaos. We all feel the brokenness of Gullus very deeply, more than ever before. And yet, we stand on the threshold of the Geula. Geula is a time when Mala haaretz dea es Hashem kamayam layam mechasim. The world will be filled with the awareness of Hashem like waters cover the seas. Now, more than ever, we can choose faith and security, emunah and bitachon, over despair and chaos. We can choose clarity over confusion and strength over helplessness. We can choose light over darkness. It's all one choice. It's the choice of Hashem's reality as our personal reality. It's the choice of our neshama as our true identity. It's the choice of Hashem's purpose as our life's calling. Uvacharta b'chaim. It's the choice to choose life. Since this book is centered within our relationship with Hashem, let's take a few minutes to discuss who Hashem is. The word Hashem means different things to different people. I've met many people who have been hurt in the name of Hashem. Unfortunately, many people feel distant from Hashem. Rahman al-Islam, because their abusers were individuals who profess to believe in Hashem. Others see Hashem as a theory, chas v'shalom, that is meaningful in discussion but irrelevant in practical life. The Hashem that we're talking about in this book and on these recordings is different from all of that. An atheist once said to a rabbi, "I don't believe in God." The rabbi said, "You know what? The God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in him either." If thinking about Hashem activates hurtful, disempowering, or unpleasant feelings for you, and if you therefore don't feel love for Hashem, please know that in this book, when we talk about Hashem, we're not talking about a creator in whose name you were hurt, neglected, misunderstood, or mistreated. We're not talking about a power who is irrelevant and uncaring. I'm inviting you to try something new, a new definition of Hashem and his reality. Here's why it's worth exploring a different dimension. Zelig was a poor man who could never afford to put anything but bread and water on his table. Even butter was a luxury. Every so often, Zelig would hear the town's richest man describe what it's like to bite into fresh, sizzling cheese blintzes. Zelig craved those blintzes. He dreamed of his wife Shprinza preparing the rich man's food. One day, Zelig decided it was time. "Please give me the recipe for your cheese blintzes," he said to the rich man. The man happily obliged. Zelig practically flew home. "Shprinza, Shprinza, guess what?" Shprinza was thrilled to make cheese blintzes, but when she read the recipe, she was stumped. "How am I going to make this without the cheese and without all the other ingredients on this list?" "That's easy," Zelig said eagerly. "Just replace whatever's missing with some flour or water." A short time later, when Zelig sat down to eat his homemade blintzes, his mouth was drooling with anticipation. He stuffed a huge piece into his mouth, and he spat it out within seconds. "That rich man doesn't know what he's talking about," Zelig decided. "Cheese blintzes are not at all tasty. They're nauseating." And now if any of us could talk to Zelig, we'd say, "Hey, please listen up. What you had wasn't blintzes. It was a cheap imitation. Don't sell yourself short." And then we'd offer him a taste of the real thing. I'd like to share the same message with anyone whose feelings of shame and mistrust get triggered when we talk about Hashem. Whether or not you like cheese blintzes is a matter of taste. By contrast, though he is infinitely incomparable, Hashem is always good. Entirely and exclusively. Hashem is not chas v'shalom an uncaring power in the distant heavens. He's not a fearsome punishing fire. If your perception of Hashem is different than loving, please know that this book is talking about a different Hashem, the real one. And you'll get to know that as you go through the book. Our personal relationship with Hashem is a central theme of this book. Don't worry if your relationship isn't yet developed in a positive, meaningful way. At the same time, don't let your old relationship get in the way of the new one you're able to form. If it's helpful, use a different word to refer to Hashem so that you can more easily differentiate between the one in whose name you've been hurt and the one who is truly your loving protector. Here is one more note. The material of this book has inspired thousands of people. It has expanded personal horizons and unlocked new possibilities. Yet as much as you can gain from reading this book or from listening to the recordings, it's only a small percentage of the gift you can give yourself. Many people who have experienced the gift of energized living have benefited from something that no book and no lecture can give us. They benefited from the acceptance and validation of a supportive group environment. When you read these pages on your own or you're listening to the recording on your own, your experience is limited to yourself. When you work through these ideas together with others, you ride on the wisdom, understanding, and encouragement of the entire group. As you listen to other people's insights and questions, you develop a deeper understanding of the ideas. As you hear about other people's personal struggles and victories, you gain willingness and courage. You also learn to accept your own story for all that it is and for all that you can let it be. If otherness is like a roller coaster, being part of an energized living learning group unblocks the seatbelt in which we are strapped. Many people have felt detached from the information of this book until they explored and discussed it in a group setting. The experience of sharing and being understood was so validating. It opened their hearts and helped them form an emotional connection that they would have never been able to form on their own. The tools outlined throughout this book and throughout these recordings are necessary. They are the pathways that lead us from otherness to the goodness we want. But reading a book or listening to a lecture, to an audio recording, by definition, is an intellectual experience. It's possible to understand it in your mind without feeling it in your heart. The group experience brings your heart on board. In the safe environment of fellow travelers, you gradually begin to implement real change in your life, and you see more success than you could possibly see while trying to absorb it all on your own. Not all groups are the same. A group is as strong as the participants and the group leader. Every Wednesday, Eastern Standard Time, 10:15 in the morning, and at 9:15 at night, there's a conference call of a group discussion that you're welcome to join free of charge. Again, that's every Wednesday morning at 10:15 and Wednesday night at 9:15 Eastern Standard Time. The phone number to join is 206-806-9626. To join an existing energized living group or to start your own group, you can also get in touch with me, and I'll be happy to let you know about current learning groups in your area. Email to Shterna at energizedliving.org. That's SHTERNA at ENERGIZEDLIVING.org, or call or text 718-576-0338. After this introduction, every chapter is about a 7-minute to a 15-minute, maximum 15-minute recording. And at the end of each recording, there are some questions for reflection, there's a summary, and there's an exercise that you can do that will help you make these ideas part of your day-to-day realities. Here's one closing thought for now. When we look at the words Geula, exile, and Geula, redemption, we find something interesting. The two words are exactly the same, except for one difference. The word Geula has an Aleph. Aleph represents the Alufay Shal Olam, the master of the world. When we invite the master of the world into our lives, when we center our lives within Hashem's reality, we experience a personal Geula. We're liberated from our limiting beliefs and our suffocating helplessness. We're free to choose an energized life. As we transform our part of the world into Geula, we're not just helping ourselves, we're bringing the ultimate Geula closer for all of Klal Yisrael and for the entire world. In the pages of this book, you'll meet many people. All of the personal stories are true, but all identifying details have been completely changed, intentionally making the protagonists, other than myself, unrecognizable, so you don't know anyone in the story. And one more note, the tools in this book are not intended to replace the medical intervention that's required for biological mental health disorders. Yet, for a Yid, even when a Yid also needs medication, we always need spiritual tools. So this book and the ideas in these recordings are made for you, no matter what your situation is. May Hashem remove all the barriers of His hiddenness and bring us the ultimate Geula now.